In the hush of evening, when the world grows soft and shadows lengthen like gentle fingers across the earth, there comes a moment, a sacred pause between the day that was and the night that beckons. It is here, in this tender threshold, that we gather tonight. The cherry blossoms have long since fallen, their petals now part of the earth they once adorned. Yet in their surrender, they whisper of something profound, that in letting go, we do not lose ourselves, but find what was always there beneath the grasping, beneath the holding on. Tonight, we walk together down a path illuminated, not by the harsh light of day, but by the gentle glow of inner knowing. Before we begin this quiet journey, dear friend, if these moments of peace speak to your heart, if you find yourself drawn to these gentle teachings that flow like water over stones, feel free to let your appreciation bloom. Subscribe if your spirit moves you to. Offer a gentle like as you would place a flower on an altar, and perhaps share in the comments the corner of this vast world where you rest tonight. For we are all pilgrims on this path, scattered across the globe, yet united in our seeking of peace. Picture, if you will, an ancient monk walking slowly through a forest of towering pines. His footsteps make no sound on the carpet of fallen needles. The air is thick with the scent of cedar and earth, and somewhere in the distance, a temple bell rings once, twice, then fades into the eternal silence. This is how we begin, not with fanfare or urgency, but with the soft rhythm of breath and being. In a small monastery, incense curls upward like prayers made visible, carrying with it the hopes and sorrows of all who seek refuge from the storms of existence. Tonight, we too become sanctuary for ourselves, for our weary minds, for the tender heart that has carried us through another day of being human. The Buddha once said that in the end, only three things matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you. As darkness settles around us like a soft blanket, we prepare to explore this final teaching, the art of releasing what binds us, especially in those precious hours when consciousness itself prepares to dissolve into dreams. What is it that keeps us turning and tossing in the night? What threads of worry and want continue to weave themselves through our minds even as our bodies cry out for rest? Tonight, we seek not to fight these visitors of the night, but to understand them with such gentle compassion that they transform from tormentors into teachers. Asterisk, asterisk, in the space between waking and sleeping, between thought and no thought, there exists a question that has no words. It floats there like morning mist over a still pond, neither demanding answer nor fearing silence. What is the sound of peace before thought arrives to name it? What exists in that precious moment when the mind has not yet begun its daily dance of creating and destroying, of grasping and pushing away? Consider the lily that blooms in the moonlight. Does it ask permission of the darkness to unfold its petals? Does it question whether it deserves the dew that gathers on its leaves? The lily simply is present, open, receiving what comes without resistance, offering its beauty without attachment to whether anyone notices. If we could listen with the ears of the heart, we might hear what the ancient teachers knew, that suffering is not found in the events of our lives, but in our relationship with them. The monsoon does not cause the mountain to suffer. Only the mountain that believes it should remain forever dry knows distress. The river does not suffer when it meets rocks in its path. It simply finds another way, wearing the obstacles smooth. With patient persistence, there was once a student who approached her teacher with a heavy heart. "Master," she whispered, "I cannot find peace. My mind churns like stormy seas, and sleep eludes me like a frightened bird." The teacher smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners like paper that has been folded with care. "Tell me," he said, "when you were a child and lay in your mother's arms, did you have to learn how to rest?" The student paused, her breath catching slightly as the memory arose unbidden, the feeling of absolute safety, of being held by something larger and more loving than her small self could comprehend. "No," she whispered. Rest was natural. It simply happened. "And what has changed?" the teacher asked gently. "Your capacity for rest remains unchanged. But now you believe you must earn it, control it, perfect it. You have forgotten that peace is not something you create. It is what remains when you stop disturbing it. In the depths of night, when the world grows quiet and even the crickets settle into contemplative silence, we can hear this truth echoing in our bones. Peace is not the absence of disturbance, but the presence of something so vast and stable that it can hold all disturbance without being shaken. It is like the sky that remains serene, whether filled with storm clouds or morning sun, the ocean depths that stay calm regardless of the waves dancing on the surface. But how do we remember this when our minds feel like leaves caught in an autumn wind, scattered and spinning with no apparent rest? How do we find our way back to that primordial knowing when suffering feels as real and present as our own heartbeat? The ancients knew a secret that modern minds often forget in their hurried pursuit of solutions. That the very questioning, the very seeking, can become another form of grasping. Like a person who tries to catch their own shadow, the harder they chase, the more elusive it becomes. What if, instead of seeking peace, we simply stop disturbing it? What if, instead of trying to end suffering, we learn to relate to it differently? Imagine sitting by a fire in a mountain cabin, watching the flames dance and flicker. You do not try to control each tongue of fire. Do not become upset when one flame grows smaller while another leaps higher. You simply watch, and in that watching, you find yourself drawn into a kind of meditation without effort. This is how we might learn to witness our own minds, not as the controller of thoughts and feelings, but as the awareness in which they arise and pass away. Tonight, as your body prepares for the sweet surrender of sleep, consider this gentle koan. If you let go of everything, every plan, every worry, every story about who you are and who you should be, what remains? Not nothing, but something so fundamental, so intimately you, that it needs no name, no description, no defense. In the monastery gardens of old Tibet, there grew a tree that was said to bloom only under starlight. The monks would sometimes sit beneath it through the night, not waiting for the blossoms to appear, but content simply to be present with the tree in whatever season found it. Some nights brought flowers, others brought only bare branches reaching toward the infinite sky. Both were received with equal gratitude. What if our minds, like that mythical tree, could be appreciated in all their seasons? What if the thoughts that visit us in the dark hours, the anxious ones, the sad ones, the restless ones, could be greeted not as enemies to be defeated, but as travelers seeking shelter for the night? The Buddha taught that the first step in ending suffering is to understand its nature. But understanding, in the Buddhist sense, is not intellectual comprehension. It is intimate knowing, like the way a mother knows her child's cry, or a gardener knows when the soil is ready for planting. It is knowledge held in the body, in the heart, in the very cells that make up this temporary form we call self. As we prepare to journey deeper into this night wisdom, let us carry this question like a gentle flame. What would happen if we stopped fighting the darkness and learned instead to trust it as the space in which stars become visible? Asterisk discovery that would ripple through time like concentric circles on a still pond. He discovered that suffering, which had seemed as permanent and unchangeable as mountains, was actually like morning fog, substantial enough to obscure the landscape, yet dissolving naturally when met with the warmth of understanding. The teaching he shared was elegantly simple, like a river finding the sea. First, he said, we must acknowledge that suffering exists. Not deny it, not rush to fix it, but simply see it clearly, the way we might notice rain beginning to fall. Second, we recognize that this suffering has a source. It grows from our attachments, our clinging to things, people, ideas, and even versions of ourselves that are constantly changing. Third, and here is where hope enters like the first bird. Song at daybreak, suffering can end. And fourth, there is a gentle path that leads to this ending. But what does this mean for us? Modern souls carrying ancient hearts, as we lie in beds far from Bodhi trees, our minds spinning with concerns unknown. To those early seekers, the teaching remains as fresh as newly fallen snow, as relevant as the breath you're taking right now. Asterisk, asterisk. Picture a woman in contemporary times, lying awake at 2 a.m., her mind rehearsing tomorrow's presentation, replaying today's conversation with her mother, worrying about her child's cough. She is experiencing what the Buddha recognized as dukkha, not just suffering in the dramatic sense, but the subtle dissatisfaction that comes from life's constant state of change. Her presentation will end. The conversation with her mother will fade into memory. Her child will recover or won't, and she lies there trying to control the uncontrollable through the sheer force of worry. The ancient teaching whispers gently to her modern predicament. What if she could hold these concerns the way the sky holds clouds, present but not possessed, aware but not attached? This is not about becoming indifferent or uncaring, but about finding the vast spaciousness within herself that can contain all of life's weather without being destroyed by any of it. In the Majjhima Nikaya, there is a teaching story about two arrows. When we experience pain, physical or emotional, it is like being struck by the first arrow. This is unavoidable, part of the human condition. But then we often strike ourselves with a second arrow, our mental reaction to the first pain. We suffer over our suffering, worry about our worrying, feel anxious about our anxiety. The Buddha taught that while we cannot always avoid the first arrow, the second arrow is optional. How might this wisdom translate to our bedtime struggles? When sleep eludes us, the first arrow might be the physical discomfort of lying awake, the tiredness we'll feel tomorrow. But the second arrow, the frustration with ourselves for not sleeping, the anxiety about the anxiety, the story we create about being bad at rest, this is where much of our nighttime suffering multiplies. Thich Nhat Hanh, the gentle Vietnamese monk who brought mindfulness to millions of Western hearts, offered a teaching as simple as dewdrops on grass. Breathing in, I know this is an in-breath. Breathing out, I know this is an out-breath. In this moment of recognition, this gentle acknowledgement, we step out of the whirlwind of mental proliferation and into the refuge of the present moment. Imagine applying this same tender awareness to sleeplessness. Lying here, I know I am lying here. Thinking, I know I am thinking. No judgment, no rush to change, just the soft recognition of what is. Like a loving grandmother watching a child play, we observe our own experience with patient, unconditional attention. The Heart Sutra speaks of emptiness, but this is not the emptiness of void or meaninglessness. It is the emptiness of a cup that can receive tea, the emptiness of a room that can welcome guests. Our minds, too, have this essential emptiness, not empty of love or wisdom or capacity for joy, but empty of the fixed, separate self that believes it must solve everything, control everything, understand everything before it can rest. In Zen temples across ancient Japan, monks would practice zazen just sitting. Not sitting to achieve something, not sitting to become someone different, but sitting to discover what was already present beneath the layers of striving and seeking. Their posture was upright, but not rigid, alert, but not tense, like a mountain. That is both firmly rooted and openly reaching toward the sky. We can bring this same quality to our relationship with sleep. Not lying down to force unconsciousness, not resting to escape life, but settling into our beds the way those monks settled into their meditation, with dignity, with presence, with trust in the natural rhythms that govern all living things. Lotus Sutra tells us that enlightenment is not something we attain, but something we uncover. Like sweeping dust from a mirror, that was always capable of reflecting the sky. Similarly, our capacity for peace, for deep rest, for freedom from suffering, these are not achievements to be earned, but our birthright to be reclaimed. Consider the teaching of impermanence, one of Buddhism's most fundamental insights. Everything changes: our thoughts, our emotions, our circumstances, even our problems. The worry that feels so solid and permanent at 3 a.m. will look different in the morning light. The grief that seems like it will never end does, gradually, transform into something else, perhaps gratitude for what was, or compassion for others who suffer similarly. When we truly understand impermanence in our bones, not just in our heads, it brings tremendous relief. We don't have to hold on to the good moments so tightly, and we don't have to fear the difficult ones so deeply. Like learning to swim by trusting the water to hold us, we can learn to rest by trusting the natural flow of experience to carry us. Where we need to go, the ancient texts speak of the middle way, the path between extreme indulgence and extreme denial. For us, this might mean finding the balance between caring deeply about our lives and holding lightly to the outcomes. We can love our families fiercely while accepting that we cannot control their choices. We can work diligently for worthy goals while releasing our attachment to specific results in the quiet hours of night. The middle way teaches us to neither push sleep away through restless activity nor chase after it with desperate urgency. Instead, we can settle into the space between wake and sleep, between effort and surrender, trusting that the body knows what it needs and will find its way to rest. When we stop interfering with its ancient wisdom as the evening deepens around us like a gentle embrace, we carry these teachings not as heavy burdens of philosophy, but as light touchstones of comfort. The Dharma, the teachings, the truth, the way is not meant to complicate our lives, but to simplify them, returning us again and again to what is essential. This breath, this moment, this profound opportunity to be awake to life while learning. The sacred art of letting go. There once lived, in a monastery nestled between mountains whose peaks touched the belly of clouds, an old monk named Tenzo. His name meant temple cook, and for 47 years he had risen before dawn to prepare meals for his brothers in the Dharma. His hands were gnarled like ancient tree roots, and his back curved from decades of bending over rice pots in vegetable gardens. Yet his eyes held a light that seemed to dance with secrets. The younger monks often wondered about Tenzo, while they struggled in meditation with minds that jumped like grasshoppers from thought to thought. He moved through his duties with a serenity so complete it seemed to emanate from his very pores. When asked about his practice, he would simply smile and return to his chopping, his stirring, his careful tending of flames that had never once burned a meal in all his years of service. One autumn evening, when the maple leaves had turned this color of sunset and the air carried the first hint of winter's approach, a young monk approached Tenzo as he cleaned the last of the dinner bowls. The monastery was settling into its evening rhythm. The final bell had rung, and most of the community had retired to their cells for contemplation and rest. "Master Tenzo," the young monk whispered, his voice tight with frustration, "I cannot sleep. My mind races like a wild horse, and no matter what I try, counting breaths, reciting sutras, even physical exhaustion from extra work in the gardens, I lie awake night after night. I fear I am failing as a monk, failing at the very foundation of practice, finding peace." Tenzo set down the bowl he had been drying with the same careful attention he gave to everything, and turned to face the young seeker. His movements were unhurried, as if this question were the most important thing in the world, deserving of his complete presence. "Tell me," Tenzo said, his voice soft as rain on leaves, "when you cook rice, what do you do?" The young monk blinked, confused by what seemed an irrelevant question. I wash the rice, add water, and heat it until it's done." "And do you stand over the pot demanding that each grain cook faster? Do you grow angry with the rice for taking time to soften? Do you open the lid constantly to check if it's ready yet? A small smile began to tug at the corner of the young monk's mouth. No, master. That would burn the rice and steam would escape. I set the conditions and then I wait. I trust the process. Tenzo nodded slowly, his eyes crinkling with gentle amusement. Walk with me to the meditation hall, he said. I have a story to share. They moved through the monastery's wooden corridors, their bare feet silent on floors polished smooth by generations of walking meditation. Paper lanterns cast warm pools of light, and somewhere in the distance, they could hear the soft chanting of evening prayers, voices blending like streams, flowing into a river dot in the meditation hall. They sat facing each other on worn cushions that held the prayers and presence of countless seekers who had sat there before. Tenzo closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering the story from some deep well within himself. When I was younger than you are now, he began, perhaps 25 years old, I was consumed by the same torment that visits you. Sleep became my enemy, and I became my own worst critic. I would lie on my sleeping mat, mind churning with self-judgment. A true practitioner should be able to find peace. If I cannot master my own mind, how can I serve others? This restlessness must be a sign of spiritual weakness. The young monk leaned forward slightly, recognizing his own inner voice in Tenzo's words. One night, after lying awake until nearly dawn, I rose and walked to the kitchen. I intended to begin the day's cooking early, thinking that perhaps busy work would quiet my turbulent thoughts. But as I entered the kitchen, I discovered my teacher, the old master who led our community then, sitting quietly at the preparation table. In front of him was a single grain of rice. A single grain? The young monk asked. One grain, Tenzo confirmed. He was examining it with a concentration most people reserve for precious jewels. When he noticed me, he gestured for me to sit beside him. Tell me, he said, what do you see? I saw a grain of rice, of course. What else was there to see? But he encouraged me to look more closely. This grain, he said, contains within it the rain that fed the plant, the soil that nourished its growth, the sun that warmed it to ripeness, the farmer who planted and harvested it, the hands that processed it, the truck that brought it here. It contains the entire universe, interdependent and interconnected. Tenzo paused, allowing the weight of the teaching to settle in the quiet space between them. Then he asked me to consider my sleeplessness the same way. What do you see when you examine your restless mind? At first, I saw only problems, my failure, my weakness, my inability to find peace. But as I learned to look with the same patient attention I might give to a grain of rice, I began to see something different. What did you see? The young monk asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I saw the love that drove my seeking. I wanted to be better, more helpful, more present for others. I saw the very human fear of not being enough, which connects me to every person who has ever lived. I saw the tiredness of a day well lived in service, the natural result of pouring myself into meaningful work. I saw thoughts arising and passing, away like clouds across the sky, none of them permanent, none of them the truth of who I was. But how did this help you sleep? Tenzo's smile deepened, and for a moment he looked not like an old man, but like a child who had discovered something wonderful. I stopped trying to sleep. Instead, I learned to rest not just my body, but my very being in the midst of whatever was present. Some nights, sleep came easily. Other nights, I lay awake, but the lying awake became a form of meditation, a way of being present with whatever arose without needing it to be different. The young monk felt something inside his chest release, like a fist that had been clenched. For so long, he had forgotten it was closed. Master, he said slowly, are you saying that the problem wasn't my sleeplessness, but my relationship with it? I am saying, Tenzo replied, rising gracefully from his cushion, that you are already perfect as you are, even with your racing mind, even with your restless nights. The path is not about becoming someone different, but about recognizing who you have always been beneath the stories you tell yourself. As they walked back through the quiet corridors, Tenzo shared one final teaching. Every morning, I rise before dawn, not because I must, but because I'm curious. What will this day offer? How will I meet it? What will I learn about the art of being present? When you lie down tonight, instead of demanding sleep, try being curious. What is this moment offering? How can I meet it with kindness? What might I discover about the nature of rest when I stop fighting for it? From that night forward, the young monk's relationship with sleep transformed. Not because his mind suddenly became still thoughts, still arose like leaves on an autumn wind, but he learned to relate to his mind the way Tenzo related to rice, with patience, with trust in natural processes, and with the understanding that his job was not to control every variable, but to create the conditions for what wanted to happen. Naturally, years later, when that young monk had become a teacher himself, students would ask him about his serene presence, his obvious deep rest, even in the midst of busy days. He would smile and tell them about an old cook who taught him that enlightenment could be found in a single grain of rice, and that peace was not something to be achieved, but something to be recognized, like discovering that the treasure you had been seeking was buried in your own backyard all along. The monastery still stands between those mountains, and they say that in the early hours before dawn, you can sometimes smell the fragrance of rice cooking with such love and attention that it becomes a form of prayer, a reminder that the most ordinary moments can become doorways to the sacred when met with presence, patience, and an open heart. Asterisk, asterisk, close your eyes now, if you feel comfortable doing so, and imagine that you are standing at the edge of a vast, moonlit lake. The water is so still, it perfectly mirrors the star-filled sky above, creating the illusion that you are suspended between two infinite expanses of space. This is the threshold where we begin our gentle journey inward, not with force or urgency, but with the soft curiosity of a child who has discovered a hidden garden behind an old, forgotten gate. The breath that flows through your body, right now, is the same breath that has sustained every human being who has ever lived. It connected the Buddha to life as he sat beneath the Bodhi tree. It filled the lungs of ancient monks as they chanted in candlelit halls, and it flows through you now as you lie in whatever corner of the world holds you tonight. This breath is your most intimate companion, arriving uninvited, leaving without permission, asking nothing from you but space to simply be. Breathing in, allow yourself to settle a little deeper into this moment, not trying to breathe better or differently, but simply noticing the miracle that is already happening, how the body knows exactly what to do without your conscious direction. The lungs expand like gentle balloons. The diaphragm moves like a wise teacher demonstrating a simple lesson, and somewhere in the vast network of your being, oxygen finds its way to every cell that needs it. You are being breathed rather than breathing. You are being lived rather than living through sheer force of will. Now, with the gentleness of morning light touching dew-covered grass, begin to notice what it feels like to inhabit this body that carries you through life. Not judging what you find, not wishing it were more relaxed, less tense, younger, stronger, different in any way, but simply acknowledging the sensations present in this moment. Perhaps there is warmth where the blanket touches your skin, coolness where air meets the exposed parts of your face. Maybe there is softness where your body meets the mattress, or a subtle pulsing that reminds you of the heart that has been faithfully beating since before you were born. This body you inhabit is like a house that has sheltered you through every experience of your life. It has carried you through first steps and last embraces, through moments of pure joy and periods of deep sorrow. It has housed every laugh you have ever laughed, every tear you have ever cried, every breath you have ever taken in wonder at a sunset or a baby's smile. How extraordinary to consider that this same body knows how to heal cuts without your conscious intervention, how to digest food while you sleep, how to regulate temperature and manufacture the chemicals needed for both alertness and rest. As you become aware of your body breathing itself, allow your attention to gently expand to include the space around it. Without opening your eyes, can you sense the boundaries of the room that holds you? The walls that create safety, the ceiling that provides shelter, the floor that offers support? Like a meditation bell ringing softly in the distance, become aware that you are surrounded by space, not empty space, but space that is alive with presence, with possibility, with the same awareness that looks out through your eyes and listens through your ears. Asterisk, asterisk. Now, with the patience of water wearing smooth a river stone, turn your attention toward the realm of thoughts and emotions that arise and pass away in the mind. But approach this inner landscape not as a tourist rushing through with a camera, trying to capture and catalog everything, but as a gentle observer who has come simply to notice what is already happening. Watch, if you will, how thoughts appear in consciousness like bubbles rising in a glass of sparkling water. Some are large and dramatic, demanding attention like actors on a stage. Others are small and quick, darting through awareness like minnows in a stream. Some thoughts feel heavy, carrying the weight of yesterday's regrets or tomorrow's concerns. Others feel light, almost playful, offering memories of kindness or moments of simple beauty. The remarkable thing, and this is what the ancient teachers discovered through patient investigation, is that you are not the thoughts themselves, but the awareness in which they arise. You are like the sky that remains unchanged, whether filled with storm clouds or peaceful blue, the ocean depths that stay calm, regardless of whether the surface is choppy or serene. This awareness that watches thoughts come and go is vast, stable, and inherently peaceful. It has never been disturbed by any thought, no matter how compelling or frightening that thought might seem. Consider for a moment the thoughts that often visit during the quiet hours of night. Perhaps worry about tomorrow's responsibilities. Will I have enough energy? Will I remember everything I need to do? Will things go according to plan? Maybe regret about today's conversations. Did I say the right thing? Should I have been more patient? Why did I react that way? Or perhaps more existential concerns. Am I living the life I'm meant to live? Am I making a meaningful contribution? What happens when this body eventually wears out? Asterisk, asterisk. These thoughts, however persistent or convincing they may seem, are like visitors who have come to call. Some visitors are welcome thoughts of gratitude, plans that bring excitement, memories that warm the heart. Others feel intrusive worries that serve no productive purpose, self-criticisms that offer no real guidance, fears about scenarios that may never come to pass. But here is the profound teaching that emerges from turning inward with gentle attention. You are not obligated to entertain every visitor that appears at the door of your mind. Imagine yourself as the gracious host of a large house with many rooms. Some visitors you invite into the living room for tea and meaningful conversation. Others you acknowledge politely, but don't invite to stay for dinner. And some those who, seen intent on disturbing the peace of your household, you can appreciate from a distance without opening the door at all. The capacity to choose how much attention and energy to give to different thoughts is one of the most empowering discoveries of inward exploration. But this choosing happens not through force or suppression, but through a kind of loving discrimination. Like a gardener who knows which plants will flourish in particular soil and which might overwhelm the more delicate flowers, you learn to recognize which thoughts deserve the fertile ground of sustained attention and which are better left to pass through like clouds across an open sky. As we continue this gentle journey inward, Allow yourself to discover the spaciousness that exists between thoughts. Just as there are spaces between the words on this page that allow you to distinguish one word from another, there are natural gaps in the stream of thinking that occurs in every mind. These gaps are not empty voids, but pregnant pauses, moments of pure awareness before the next wave of mental activity arises. In these spaces between thoughts, something extraordinary becomes available, a quality of rest that is not dependent on circumstances, a peace that does not require problems to be solved, a contentment that asks nothing from the world except permission to be present. This is the rest that the Buddha spoke of when he described nirvana, not as a place to go, but as a way of being that is available right here, right now, in the midst of ordinary human life. With each breath now, allow yourself to sink a little deeper into this recognition of your true nature, not the personality that has a name and a history and preferences and concerns, but the awareness that is aware of the personality, the consciousness that is conscious of thoughts and feelings and sensations without being diminished or threatened by any of them. This awareness is like the space in a room that allows furniture to be arranged and rearranged without the space itself being changed. It is present when you are happy and when you are sad, when you are busy and when you are still, when you are awake and when you sleep. It is the most intimate aspect of your being, and yet it has no personal characteristics, no agenda, no preferences about how life should unfold. From this place of spacious awareness, even sleeplessness can be held with tenderness. The body lying in bed, the mind producing thoughts about tomorrow's challenges, the emotions that arise in response to the day's experiences, all of this can be embraced with the same unconditional love that a mother offers to a child who is learning to walk, falling down, getting up, falling down again, but never failing to be cherished exactly as they are in each moment of the process. Asterisk, asterisk, in the ancient monasteries of Tibet, there lived hermit monks who spent decades in mountain caves, sustained by little more than barley tea and the nourishment that comes from profound inner exploration. These practitioners discovered truths about the nature of mind and reality that seem almost magical to those of us living in more conventional circumstances. Yet their discoveries were not supernatural powers, but rather natural capacities that become available when we learn to look deeply into the ordinary miracle of consciousness itself. One such hermit, whose name has been lost to time, but whose teaching continues to whisper through the centuries, made a discovery that changed his entire relationship with suffering. He had been meditating in his cave for 7 years, wrestling with the same doubts and fears that visit most sincere practitioners. Am I wasting my life? Is this search for enlightenment just elaborate spiritual materialism? How can I justify sitting in solitude while others struggle in the world below? A breakthrough came not during meditation, but during a moment of complete exhaustion. He had spent the entire night in sitting practice, his mind churning with self-judgment and spiritual ambition, when suddenly he simply gave up, not in despair, but in the way that someone who has been carrying a heavy pack for miles suddenly realizes they can set it down. In that moment of complete surrender, he noticed something extraordinary. The awareness that had been watching his struggle was completely untouched by it. It was like discovering that he had been standing in a clear pool of water, mistaking his reflection for his true face. All the turbulence he had been trying to calm was only on the surface beneath. It lay depths of stillness so profound that they seemed to contain the silence of eternity itself. This discovery led him to understand what Tibetan teachers call the nature of mind, not the mind's contents, but its essential quality, which is like space itself, open, unobstructed, naturally luminous. From this recognition emerged a practice so simple, it seems almost too easy to be effective. When thoughts arose, instead of engaging with their content or trying to push them away, he would simply ask, "Who is aware of this thought?" The answer, he discovered, was never another thought, but rather the awareness itself, vast, unchanging, inherently peaceful. This same inquiry can become a gentle companion during our nighttime hours. When worry about tomorrow's presentation arises, instead of diving into the content of the worry or fighting against it, we can ask, who is aware of this worry? When the mind begins rehearsing conversations or replaying events from the day, we can return to this fundamental question. Who knows that thinking is happening? The answer to these questions is not intellectual, but experiential, like the difference between reading about the taste of honey and actually tasting it. The who that is aware cannot be found as an object because it is the very subject of all experience. It's like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror impossible, because the eyes are what makes seeing possible in the first place. Another hidden truth discovered by contemplative practitioners across cultures involves the relationship between sleep and consciousness. In the Mandukya Upanishad, an ancient Sanskrit text that predates Buddhism, consciousness is described as having three primary states: waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. But the text speaks of a fourth state, called turiya, which is the awareness. That remains constant through all three changing states. This teaching suggests something remarkable. Even in deep sleep, when the personal self seems to disappear entirely, awareness continues. It's not the awareness of thoughts or sensations, but pure awareness itself. Like a light so bright, it illuminates without effort. So natural, it requires no maintenance. Understanding this can transform our relationship with the transition into sleep, from a loss of control into a voluntary dissolving into something larger and more fundamental than our daytime identity. Consider this gentle experiment as you prepare for sleep. Instead of trying to fall asleep, see if you can notice the awareness that remains present, whether you are awake or asleep. It's like learning to identify with the movie screen rather than the constantly changing images projected upon it. The screen is never damaged by any movie, never enhanced by particularly beautiful scenes, never diminished by tragic stories. It simply provides the space in which all experiences can appear and disappear. In the Zen tradition, there's a famous koan: show me your original face before your parents were born. This is not asking for a logical answer, but pointing towards something that exists before personal history, before learned identities, before the accumulation of experiences that we usually think of as self. Some students spend years wrestling with such koans intellectually, but the answer can only be found in direct recognition, like suddenly seeing a hidden image in a stereogram that was there all along, waiting to be perceived. Your original face is present right now as you read these words. It's the awareness that has been constant throughout your entire life, even though everything else, your body, your thoughts, your circumstances, your relationships, has been in constant flux. It was present when you were 5 years old, and it will be present if you live to be 95. It's not personal in the usual sense, yet it's more intimately you than your name or your memories or your preferences. The Vietnamese Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh, offers another profound teaching that seems simple on the surface, but reveals deeper layers the more it is contemplated. He suggests that instead of saying, "I am angry," when anger arises, we practice saying, "Anger is present," or "I am aware of anger arising." This subtle shift moves us from identification with our emotions to recognition that we are the space in which emotions come and go. Applied to sleeplessness, this teaching invites us to shift from "I can't sleep" to "sleeplessness is present," or "I am aware of the body's alertness right now." This is not semantic game playing, but a genuine transformation in identity, from being the victim of our experiences to being the aware witness of them. Perhaps one of the most surprising discoveries that emerges from sustained inner exploration is that what we usually call problems are often invitations to deeper understanding. The sleepless nights that seem like Obstacles to peace can become opportunities to discover forms of rest that don't depend on unconsciousness. The anxious. Thoughts that feel like tormentors can become teachers pointing toward attachments we didn't know we were carrying. In the Sufi tradition, there's a beautiful story about a man who loses his ring in his house, but looks for it outside under a street lamp because the light is better there. When asked why he doesn't look where he actually dropped the ring, he realizes his folly. This story points to our tendency to look for peace and fulfillment in external circumstances, when what we seek can only be found within. The street lamp of our searching often focuses on changing our external conditions, finding the perfect sleeping environment, the right technique, the ideal circumstances. But the ring of peace was never actually lost. It was simply overlooked while we searched everywhere else. It rests in the awareness that is reading these words right now, the consciousness that has been present through every experience of your life. As we prepare to sink deeper into this exploration of nighttime wisdom, carry with you this gentle paradox discovered by countless seekers. The very effort to find peace can be what obscures it, like muddy water that becomes clear only when we stop stirring it. Tonight, instead of seeking sleep, see if you can discover the rest that is already present in the awareness that never sleeps. The peace that exists not as a state to be achieved, but as the very ground of being itself. Asterisk, asterisk, in the soft darkness. That now embraces us like a meditation shawl. We turn our gentle attention to perhaps the most fundamental question that has ever stirred the human heart. What is the true nature of suffering? And where does peace actually reside? Like following a moonbeam to its source, we embark on this inquiry not with the urgency of problem solving, but with the tender curiosity of lovers discovering each other by candlelight. Imagine, if you will, a lotus flower growing in the muddy depths of a pond. From the murky bottom, where its roots anchor in decomposing leaves and sediment, it sends forth a stem that travels through layers of dark water toward the light above. When it finally breaks the surface, it unfolds into a bloom of such pristine beauty that it has become the symbol of enlightenment across many Eastern traditions. The lotus teaches us something profound. It does not become beautiful despite the mud from which it grows, but because of it. The very conditions that appear most hostile to beauty become the nourishment for transcendence. Our suffering, dear friend, is often like that muddy pond, bottom dark, unpleasant, something we believe we must escape from to find peace. But what if, like the lotus, our moments of deepest difficulty are not obstacles to awakening, but the very conditions that make awakening possible? What if the sleepless nights, the anxious thoughts, the tender spots in our hearts where vulnerability meets the world, what if these are not signs that something is wrong with us, but invitations to discover a peace so profound it can embrace all of life's weather? The Buddha described suffering using the word dukkha, which is often translated as suffering, but carries a more subtle meaning, something like the dis-ease that comes from life's constant state of change, or the unsatisfactoriness that arises when we resist the flow of experience. It's like trying to build a house on a river. No matter how carefully we construct it, the flowing water beneath ensures that nothing can remain permanently stable. Consider the suffering that visits you in the quiet hours of night. Perhaps it takes the form of worry about a loved one's health, anxiety about work responsibilities, or a more existential ache about the meaning and direction of your life. Look closely at this suffering with the gentle precision of a scientist studying a flower. What is its actual texture? How does it move through your body? What story does it tell about what should be different? You might notice that suffering has a quality of contraction to it, like a muscle tightening around a splinter. There's a sense of resistance, of pushing against what is present, of insisting that life should be other than it is in this moment. This resistance is natural and even understandable. When we encounter pain, the instinctive response is to pull away, to protect ourselves, to seek relief. But here's the paradox that contemplatives have discovered through millennia of careful investigation. The resistance to pain often creates more suffering than the pain itself. It's like being caught in quicksand. The more frantically we struggle to escape, the deeper we sink. But if we can learn to be still, to stop fighting the very ground that holds us, we discover that what seems solid and threatening is actually more fluid than we realized. The quicksand of difficult emotions, when met with stillness rather than struggle, often reveals itself to be not as solid or permanent as it first appeared. This doesn't mean becoming passive in the face of genuine problems that require action. If your house is on fire, you call the fire department rather than sitting in meditation watching the flames. But so much of our suffering comes not from actual present moment dangers, but from our mental resistance to experiences that are already happening, regretting the past, fearing the future, judging the present for not matching our preferences. Consider how much energy goes into this simple act of wishing things were different. As you lie in bed, perhaps your mind generates thoughts like, I should be asleep by now. Tomorrow will be difficult if I'm tired. Other people don't seem to have trouble sleeping. Or I used to sleep better when I was younger. Each of these thoughts is a form of resistance to the present moment, a way of arguing with reality as it is right now. But what would happen if, instead of fighting the sleeplessness, you became curious about it? What if you approached your wakeful state the way a marine biologist might approach a new species of sea creature, with fascination rather than judgment, with a desire to understand rather than to eliminate? You might discover that beneath the label insomnia lies a rich landscape of sensations, thoughts, and feelings that have something to teach you about the nature of mind and body, about what your system needs, about how awareness itself never tires even when the body requires rest. Peace, you might begin to discover, is not the absence of difficulty, but a quality of being that can remain steady in the midst of any experience. It's like the depths of the ocean, which remain calm and still even when storms rage on the surface. This peace is not something you achieve through effort, but something you recognize as having been present all along, like discovering that the treasure you've been seeking has been buried in your own backyard. The ancient sages spoke of two kinds of peace: the peace that comes from getting what we want, and the peace that comes from wanting what we get. The first type is conditional and temporary. It depends on circumstances aligning with our preferences, and it disappears as soon as conditions change. The second type is unconditional and permanent. It comes from aligning ourselves with life as it actually unfolds, rather than demanding that life align with our expectations. In the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu writes, "The sage is guided by what he feels and not by what he sees." This points to a profound teaching about the difference between our conceptual understanding of experiences and our direct, felt sense of them. Our minds might tell us that sleeplessness is terrible, that worry is dangerous, that we're failing if we can't control our inner states. But if we tune into the actual felt sense of being awake in the middle of the night, we might discover something unexpected. Maybe there's a quality of aliveness in being conscious while the world sleeps, a sense of participation in the great rhythm that moves between activity and rest, between engagement and withdrawal. Maybe the worried thoughts, when felt directly rather than believed automatically, reveal themselves to be expressions of caring imperfect, perhaps, but arising from a heart that loves deeply enough to be concerned about the welfare of others and ourselves. This shift from conceptual judgment to felt experience is like the difference between reading a menu and tasting food. The menu can tell you about the ingredients and preparation, but only direct taste reveals the actual flavors, textures, and satisfaction that come from eating. Similarly, our thoughts about our experiences are like menus, sometimes accurate descriptions, but often inadequate substitutes for the direct knowing that comes from intimate presence with what is actually happening. As we rest here together in this gentle exploration, Allow yourself to consider the possibility that your sleeplessness, your anxiety, your tender human struggles are not problems to be solved, but experiences to be met with the same loving attention you might offer to a friend who comes to you in distress. You wouldn't tell a grieving friend to stop feeling sad or an excited friend to calm down immediately. You would offer presence, understanding, perhaps a gentle touch or patient listening. What if you could offer this same quality of friendship to your own inner experiences? What if, instead of being the harsh critic of your mental and emotional states, you became their compassionate witness? This doesn't mean indulging in destructive patterns or becoming identified with difficult emotions, but rather holding them in the vast space of awareness, the way the sky holds all weather present to everything, disturbed by nothing, naturally returning to clarity when the storms pass. The Buddha taught that the root of suffering lies in our attempts to make permanent what is inherently impermanent, to control what is naturally fluid, to possess what can only be experienced. But peace, true peace, comes from recognizing our fundamental nature as the awareness in which all experiences arise and pass away, like ripples on the surface of a lake that never disturb the water's essential wetness. Tonight, as your body rests and your mind dances its ancient dance of thoughts and dreams, see if you can discover this awareness that has been your most constant companion throughout every moment of your life. Not seeking to change anything, not trying to achieve any particular state, but simply recognizing what has always been present, the consciousness that is conscious right now, the awareness that makes all experience possible, the peace that exists not as the opposite of disturbance, but as the very space in which all disturbance is held with infinite tenderness. There is a story told in ashrams across India about a monkey who discovers a jar with a narrow neck filled with nuts. The monkey reaches into the jar and grasps a handful of nuts, but when he tries to withdraw his hand, he finds that his closed fist is too large to pass through the opening. He is trapped, but only by his own unwillingness to let go. If he would simply open his hand and release the nuts, he would be free. But the monkey's desire for the nuts keeps him captive, rattling the jar in frustration, never realizing that his freedom lies not in getting what he wants, but in releasing his grip. How often we find ourselves like this monkey in the quiet hours of night, grasping tightly to thoughts, worries, plans, and problems that seem so important in the light of day, but now hold us captive in the darkness. Our minds close around these mental objects like fists around nuts, and we shake and rattle in our beds, never quite recognizing that freedom lies not in solving every problem or controlling every outcome, but in the simple, profound act of letting go. But what does it truly mean to let go? It's one of those phrases that sounds simple, but reveals layers of complexity the more deeply we explore it. Letting go is not the same as giving up. Giving up carries a sense of defeat, of resignation, of turning away from life. Letting go is more like what a river does when it meets a boulder in its path. It doesn't give up its essential nature of flowing, but it releases its attachment to flowing in one particular direction. It finds another way, wearing the obstacle smooth with patient persistence, eventually carving new channels that might be even more beautiful than the original path. Consider how you hold the things that matter most to you: your relationships, your work, your health, your dreams for the future. There's a natural human tendency to grip these precious things tightly, as if the force of our holding could keep them safe, could prevent them from changing, could guarantee their permanent presence in our lives. But this very grasping often creates the suffering we're trying to avoid. It's like trying to cup water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips through your fingers. The ancient Chinese philosophy of Wu Wei teaches us about action through non-action, about accomplishing through allowing, about the power that comes not from force, but from alignment with natural flow. A master calligrapher does not grip the brush with white knuckles and force the ink onto paper. Instead, she holds the brush lightly, allowing her breath and intention to guide the movement, letting the characters emerge through her rather than from her. The most beautiful calligraphy appears effortless precisely because it requires the letting go of effort, the surrender of the ego's need to control every stroke dot in the realm of sleep. This teaching becomes profound medicine for our restless nights. How often do we approach sleep like a goal to be achieved through effort and will? We try techniques, we follow rules, we become frustrated when sleep doesn't arrive on our timeline. But sleep, like love, like creativity, like all the most precious experiences of human life, cannot be forced. It can only be invited, received, allowed to unfold in its own natural timing. Imagine approaching your bed each night like a gardener approaches a garden, not demanding that flowers bloom immediately, but creating the conditions for blooming, and then stepping back with trust. You prepare the soil of your body through gentle movement or warm baths. You plant the seeds of relaxation through conscious breathing or quiet reflection. You water with intention by releasing the day's concerns and tomorrow's plans. Then, like any wise gardener, you wait with patience, knowing that the blooming will happen in its own perfect timing. But the deepest level of letting go involves releasing our attachment to being the one in control of our experience. There's a part of the ego mind that believes it's responsible for managing every aspect of life, every thought, every feeling, every outcome. This part works overtime during sleepless hours, trying to solve problems that may not need solving, trying to prevent futures that may never unfold, trying to fix aspects of ourselves that may not actually be broken. What would it feel like to gently retire this inner manager, to give it permission to rest for the night? You might imagine speaking to this part of yourself with the same tenderness you'd show to a devoted employee who has been working overtime for weeks. Thank you for caring so much. Thank you for trying to keep everything safe. You can rest now. Everything that truly needs attention will still be there tomorrow, and you'll have the energy to meet it freshly then. The Buddhist teaching of non-attachment offers another perspective on letting go. Non-attachment doesn't mean not caring, quite the opposite. It means caring so deeply and purely that we don't contaminate our love with possessiveness, our concern with control, our devotion with demands. It's like the sun's relationship with the earth. The sun gives its light and warmth unconditionally, without demanding anything in return, without trying to control how that light is received or used. When we bring this quality of non-attachment to our own inner experiences, something beautiful happens. We can feel our emotions fully without being swept away by them. We can acknowledge our thoughts without being enslaved by them. We can experience physical sensations, including the alertness of a wakeful body, without making them wrong or trying to force them to be different. There's a meditation practice from the Vipassana tradition that involves labeling whatever arises in awareness with gentle, non-judgmental recognition, thinking, feeling, hearing, remembering, planning, worrying. The practice is not to stop any of these activities, but simply to notice them arising and passing away, like watching clouds drift across a vast sky. In this watching, something profound occurs. We begin to disidentify from the contents of consciousness and recognize ourselves as consciousness itself, applied to sleeplessness. This practice might sound like, here is wakefulness, here is the mind creating thoughts about tomorrow. Here is the body feeling alert, here is worry about being tired, here is the story that this is a problem. Each recognition is like a gentle release, a small letting go that doesn't require anything to change, but simply acknowledges what is. Present without resistance. The Sufi poet Rumi wrote, "Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment." There's profound wisdom in this paradoxical instruction. Our cleverness, our attempts to figure everything out, to control outcomes, to manage our experience through mental effort, often becomes the very trap that keeps us suffering. Bewilderment, on the other hand, is a state of open not knowing that allows life to reveal itself in ways our cleverness never could have predicted. What if tonight you could sell your cleverness about how sleep should happen, how your mind should behave, how your life should unfold, and instead buy bewilderment, a willingness to not know, to be surprised, to let your experience teach you, rather than trying to teach your experience how it should behave. This doesn't mean becoming passive or irresponsible. Tomorrow, you may need to make practical decisions, take appropriate actions, engage with the world in skillful ways. But tonight, in this sacred space between day and dreams, you can practice the profound art of letting go, releasing your grip on outcomes you cannot control, surrendering your resistance to experiences you cannot change, and discovering the freedom that comes not from getting what you want, but from wanting what you get. As we continue to explore this gentle territory of release and surrender, allow yourself to rest in the recognition that letting go is not something you do, but something you stop doing. You stop doing the grasping, the resistance, the effortful management of experience. Like unclenching a fist that has been closed for so long you forgot it was tense, letting go is a relaxation into your natural state, open, receptive, trusting in the wisdom that moves the stars and grows the flowers, the same wisdom that knows exactly how to rest your body and restore your spirit when you step aside and allow it to work its quiet miracles.